This is a recap for the TV miniseries Clickbait. And I just finished watching the last episode. And yeah, I didn't was enjoying the whodunit sort of aspect, and in a way I wasn't trying to work out, maybe part of me was, or sort of half guessing, but I wasn't too invested in trying to desperately know or guess beforehand the person who murdered Nick, and that's kind of follow along with the plot of what was being given. So it was hinting towards the end that it was Matt who may have done it, and then of course at the end it was Dawn and Ed, which I just read a little bit of an interview with the sort of TV showrunner or creator, and I think it's saying it was designed for the person who committed the crime not to be in until the last episode, so to make it, I think, as you said, almost impossible to guess who done it. I had no sort of suspicions about Dawn at all, and I think the showrunner mentioned that he was trying to perhaps film a scene with Dawn in it earlier in the season, just drop a hint, but I think because of COVID it just wasn't possible. So he said kind of towards the end they just had to do a lot of explaining. Yeah, so I enjoyed the sort of mystery aspect of the show, and I watched before this, although I didn't record a reaction to it, I watched the One of Us is Lying, which is another sort of whodunit, and yeah, it's always quite enjoyed the sort of momentum of trying to, of leading up to the reveal at the end, the mystery. So, and it's interesting because they're two very different shows in terms of the setting and the types of characters around it. But yeah, I've got the Wikipedia page up for the series where it's got the breakdown of each episode, so I may just sort of skim read some of it and see what things come to mind that I want to, any comments for that come to mind. But overall I really liked the each episode was a different aspect, a different sort of point of view for what was going on, and it was almost, I can imagine, a timeline of the show. There's like different squares here and there of the characters sort of, reacting or going into their point of view. So I found that quite unique. I haven't come across that before as much in that way, where in some ways they each felt like their own little story, and there was still enough cohesion for it to relate to the main plot. So start with episode 1, The Sister, and one thing I'll say about the character Pia is that I find her really grating in that episode. Felt like the other episodes it was a lot less so, I think, because there wasn't probably a huge amount of long scenes with Pia in it, but the first episode it was just such a grating character for me. She was had this, like, what I perceived as very abrasive, and there's another word I was trying to think of. It begins with H. Can't think of it now, but so yeah, it had that quality, and I found it difficult to sort of absorb her character, even though she was fascinating in terms of her energy, and I think it was like I think all of the characters generally in the episodes were really well developed, and it was really a show about character as well as the mystery. And I think in reading that interview earlier, it was mentioned about there's exactly that. I think that it was a mystery and as a whodunit, but there's also a lot of sort of character study, and even the reason how all this started was Dawn's loneliness of the showrunner mentioned about sort of having, sort of Dawn invisible almost. You can sense someone having that sort of those challenges in life later on when you're married and you're kind of in that space when you're kind of getting towards an older age, and where everything just seems harder. It's harder to build social connections, there's less opportunities as life goes on. Like right at the start, there's infinite opportunities in like school and things like that. But so it's interesting how it came down to that. Of course, first episode, Sister, is very, of course, a manic episode of to seeing what happens with Nick and the countdown and him being kidnapped, and Pia desperately trying to take action before 5 million views. And it's really hard to guess Pia's occupation when you learn she was a nurse. I was like, I didn't know what she would do, but just because I think she came across so abrasive, and a lot of that was to do with like the panic and all the emotions she went through, how she reacted to Nick's situation. But then there's like a surprising like connection she has to patients, especially I think it's Vincent, I think, that helps her in the first episode, and she gets his help and they have like a connection. And Pia receives that kind of voicemail when she gets her phone back online. It's that voicemail from Nick. So I wonder what that's about. Maybe it's just about him not being able to accept sort of Sophie's affair or something like that, maybe. I think there's a scene later where he's day drinking, and this is when you kind of know Dawn has been doing what she's doing, and he's kind of said, he can't get over it. And I think maybe it has something to do with that. I might be completely wrong, but that's what comes to mind. And again, it's the whole 360. I think that's what the showrunner mentioned as well, where it's like a 360 panoramic view of the situation, but also happening in real time as the story unfolds. And then move on to the detective, another, I think it's like a likeable character, someone who's trying his best to get into homicide, and he's got loads of barriers, and he feels like an outsider for many reasons. One of the biggest ones comes in some of his actions, where he kind of follows his gut, and I don't blame him for sort of doing things on his own, because with that kind of lack of trust and respect and communication from the actual homicide squad, then it's hard to kind of just give over information and sort of not have that valued in some ways. So he kind of just went on his own to investigate, and as it transitioned from a missing persons case to a homicide case. There's little moments as Detective Roshan, when he comes into like the homicide squad room with the iPad from, I think it's Ethan's iPad, saying, hey, you guys missed it on a search, and obviously, of course, didn't do himself any favours with kind of some of his actions as well. And there's that whole kind of geocaching aspect, which is like a lot of the show is quite modernised. There's obviously loads of like kind of, I found nice ways of including text messages and information where it wasn't too, it was bold, but it wasn't too jarring. So it's kind of had different colour backgrounds, and that made it quite unique when each person was communicating via text and that kind of thing. And in this case, there's like a geocaching app that sort of Vincent created, or help sort of put into an app, I guess. He created that, and sort of in this point Roshan was sort of acting on the outside, so he was kind of using whatever he could to help, and he was kind of using that information to think, oh, that's where they haven't searched, or he kind of, and he obviously as it goes down the road, as they find Nick's body, I think it's in The Wife, perhaps it's in that episode where he gets or the end of episode 2, was it? It might have been more down the line. I'm getting myself confused. But at some point, he finds, he leads everyone to the body, and once they listen to his theory on the geocaching about the area where people haven't searched this area, and this is a possible place people could use to sort of dump a body. So he kind of earns his way into that squad, and they realise his value in the end. So we've got Sophie in the 3rd episode, The Wife. And again, it's a really unique way to unravel the story in like a linear way, but again in a 360 way, and you're in someone else's perspective. At first I was missing Pia. I kind of enjoyed that point of view, and I was just but the way the other characters were developed and created, it was you quickly kind of connect with the other characters and see the value of that. So a lot of this is sort of unraveling. So it says Sophie returns home to break the news of Nick's death. So so it was end of episode 2. And Sophie runs into Emma Beasley, one of we later learn who was also catfished by a fake Nick profile. But in that time, and the way it's presented to the audience, we think, oh, this is real. Like she had a real in real life relationship with Nick, and I think there's some flashbacks as well with them together, and obviously it's probably from her imagination instead of what actually happened. And a lot of it is related to Sophie's affair as well with Curtis, and you kind of learn about that, which makes it interesting, I guess, because at some point it's kind of at the time there's a belief that they both like had affairs, and kind of adds to the emotional complexity of the situation about how to feel about that, where there's maybe been some sort of betrayal, but then that's gone both ways. So and they go to the memorial. This is at the end of the episode, and it says for a bystander to accost her, tell Sophie that she'd be ashamed of her affair. And I thought that was a strong comment, because not to say what's right or wrong, but when someone dies, it's not a case of, if like let's just say that you know, let's say if you kind of stop loving Nick, so it's kind of a real sort of, maybe that character, it gives him a little insight into that character who's perhaps not, you know, how can I describe it? I wouldn't say mature, but just doesn't have the big picture on life. That of course it's not something to approve or to say, you know, but there's so much more than that information about their marriage and things. It's not like in this instance it was something that was started and stopped, and then they were trying to rebuild. So sometimes his comments, people, you know, just maybe it gives a reflection of society where they get a slice of information, and with that slice perhaps they stretch it to make, well, that covers the whole lens, that's the whole picture of she did this, and so she should be ashamed of herself because of that, and ignoring all of the other years of time and moments and the whole other situation around it. So maybe that's a good reflection on society. The episode 4, The Mistress. So we kind of get introduced to Emma Beasley, and there's a lot of sympathy maybe for her in this episode, because at the time we believed that she in some way was genuine, even though she was catfished from her side of things. It's kind of a genuine loss for her, and confusion as well. She was trying to, like, she travelled all the way there to for multiple reasons, perhaps to get some closure, find answers, maybe to somehow be close to the family, because she felt close to who she thought was Nick at the time. And towards the end of that, Emma receives a threatening phone call, and then there's obviously, she gets kind of caught in the open and attacked. So there's that as well. I don't know if we find out who actually attacked her. I can't remember if it was Simon or someone else. I can't remember actually, but the reporters, one comment to say for that episode, that character was really well put together, because you kind of, yeah, it's easy to dislike his kind of the way going about his sort of ethics as a reporter, how he gets information. And I feel like it's really good to have I try and say to, yeah, I kind of liked his partner's character in that it really reflected what a lot of people probably thought about Ben Park, and in that there's human beings on the other side of his stories. I thought that was a really strong line, and again it's another reflection about getting caught up in power, and you know, he was just wanting to be the best reporter and blinded by, probably not completely, like he wasn't completely ignorant about it, but he was definitely caught up in that. And I reckon if he was to really sit down and know the damage he was doing, especially to Simon as well, breaking in, stealing, and it reminds me of, you know, lots of stories about the press and how they've overstepped the line, and really of so many things as well. So it's a reflection of, or hinting at, past times when that's happened, and probably will continue to happen, because again it's just human beings on the other side of that. So with all types of jobs, it depends on how well they've developed themselves and kind of connecting with themselves and understanding their place in the world, versus the kind of egoic energy about everything's about me and what I can achieve and do, and that itself is just a recipe for things like this to happen, or to act in this way when there isn't that compassion for other people, or that true kind of understanding about reality, I guess. So it kind of escalates Ben's sort of behaviours and trying to get an interview with Sophie, and his boss kind of giving it to him to say, like, you need to get me an interview with her, and of course he takes it in the way of as any means possible and goes into the home as a delivery driver and starts recording, and lots of stuff that you just think, oh my goodness. And part of you can, it's easy to believe that stuff happens as well. So my tripod almost falls over. And the brother episodes, it feels like each episode again has its own story. A lot of them is the character, I should say, really brings out for that episode, as well as the background story of how each of these characters plug into the main storyline. So we kind of meet Simon, and it's kind of a heartbreaking story with him and connections with his sister. It's a sister named Tara. Can't quite remember. It says here. Is it Sarah? It's a relationship with Jeremy. Yeah, it says Sarah. Tara's a different. I think she's the volleyball team person that Matt was involved in, I think. Yeah, so it's difficult because if you've come across this through my other channel, Therapeutic Space, I do mental health vlogs, and you kind of would understand it's difficult to, I could relate a lot to like this, the mental health sort of aspect of this episode with Sarah. So I could really sort of empathize with some of the things she was going through, and and it's interesting to kind of, because when Nick first got kidnapped, I just imagined it was just this someone who just craved violence, or he was just really angry with the world, and he wanted to visit vigilante justice. But this is like again another human story, which goes through each of these characters, the real human side of Simon reacting to sort of what happened to his sister, and in his eyes he was somewhat responsible or contributed to the actions that happened. Of course it's not entirely that person's fault, but in his eyes I guess that percentage can go up and down for depending on everybody's sort of view, but a large part contributed to what happened to Sarah. And you kind of see the flashbacks of them when they were kind of having good times and things. And I think it was telling how quickly Sarah unraveled in that aspect. And I feel like with mental health it can really be like that. It's not necessarily like a gradient where, say, if your mood is 9, you're like a really good mood, then it always goes down like 1 at a time. It's like sometimes it can be like a trap door, so you may be feeling really good and something can happen and suddenly you're just completely in this rock bottom place, and that seemed to be the case for Sarah. And you talk about relationships and emotions, that's one of the most difficult kind of areas of life, where if anything was going to take you down like a trap door, it would be that, and especially a romantic sort of relationship, because there's such a vulnerability to put yourself out there, and feelings and everything else, and it seems like it was fairly early, even though there's strong emotions, it was still fairly early with their with her kind of relationship with, say, Nick. Obviously it wasn't Nick, it was the catfish version of Nick, but just how quickly emotions can build up, and especially when you add mental health there, it's always going to be like a vulnerability about that. So when things, if she was a lot of her emotions invested in just that relationship or connection, then that kind of went away, or that suddenly turned on her, then it's like almost everything kind of feels like turns on you in that way. So I really related to Sarah's story, and really felt for Simon as well, because as he was kind of in the interrogation room, it slowly reveals that you can sense the humanity in him, and that and then there's obviously the reveal that he let it go. And that was a huge kind of another like sort of twist, or a sense of, because I immediately thought it was Simon as well, and didn't have of course I wasn't sort of one of those viewers that that has a lot of brain power to kind of work out. I'm sure lots of people watching this were really on the ball and on point, thinking it's probably not him, that's but for me I was just kind of just watching it and going with the ride. I wasn't really thinking too much around it, or who could it be. But, so these episodes I watched yesterday, and maybe some the day before, and today I watched episode 7 and episode 8. Not sure if episode 8 was an extra long episode. I didn't look at it felt like a longer episode, but and again with the son, so this is Ethan's story. Again, it felt like almost a new show with this episode, because it was obviously new surroundings, him and his school, so it was like almost felt like a different show in some respects, but in a nice way. It didn't feel disjointed. It was just refreshing just to go into another world, and again the consistency in regards to the characters and how well they were acted out, and the depth, and to get to kind of look at Ethan's story, and also Kai, his brother's in there as well, and you see their kind of different sort of views, like Kai sort of deleting videos and pictures of his dad, and then Ethan sort of perhaps as a bit more of a mature age was like, hey, this may not be the case. And he did at the start, he didn't say it out loud, but he was just kind of stopped that action from happening, because it's obviously a permanent thing to sort of delete. Again, it's another modern thing as well, because I'm so used to picture albums and people tearing them up and things. Now it's the delete button. So my favourite thing about this episode was his relationship with is it Alison? And I'm getting all these names wrong. Let's just say it's Alison, a woman beginning with A. I think it is Alison. Yeah, Alison. Just saw her name there, and it was so nice to know that that wasn't a catfish, another one, because I feel like if it was, it would be too sort of pessimistic and maybe unrealistic as well. I don't know, but yeah, it was really refreshing just to see their connection, and it was someone who was super nice and things, but it's so understandable for Ethan to be suspicious after he kind of got their hint when he was getting a lift back with Pia, and she asked Ethan, like, you've met her, right, after everything that's happened to your dad? And he's like, and then he starts to get suspicious. And again, it's another mental health thing with her social anxiety, so I kind of personally connected with that a lot, with sort of her living life online, and yeah, that was such a nice sort of connection they had. And and again, everything's so instant, even if they had not met and they lived on other sides, but just having phones, it's just another aspect of modern connection, really, where you can keep texting. And I've been in that place where you can sort of instantly reply, and that communication goes on, where no text message is ever kind of there's always kind of these almost text conversations, so there's always instant replies and things. And even I think there's a point where Alison didn't reply for a bit and she said, oh sorry, I was just having dinner, sort of thing. So I really liked their connection. That was kind of my favourite part of the episode. And it's strange because when he knocked on her door and met her dad, you just got this, I guess, this kind of thoughts with other shows and movies, like, you know, parents overprotective or always protective on their children and things. But it's so nice to see there was no drama there. It's just, oh, it's, you know, a friend. And it's like for Alison to just tell her dad, yeah, it's just a friend, you know, come on in. And there's no kind of sort of third degree of who's this kind of stranger. And that was refreshing to see as well. There's maybe an understanding between Alison and her dad. Maybe there was something there that was shown in that action of perhaps their maturity in their relationship, and that it wasn't a distrustful one. It was like, perhaps you didn't need to vet this guy. If Alison was okay with him, then that's more than enough. So I quite like that. Yeah, of course Vince pops up as well. It's just showing in the end of episode 7, you know, Vince and Pia together as they kind of deduce the catfish sort of details, and he's kind of on the case, and Pia's kind of asking for his help. And yeah, he kind of comes up with the information about Tara, which is the volleyball high school girl who's on the volleyball team, and he got the information about, you know, that Tara is being harassed, and like explicit pictures of her posted online as well. And then yeah, kind of that plays out eventually. Again, she's trying to find the truth of the story, and I think that was a good line when Pia visited Tara in person to kind of get to the truth, to say, you know, what happened. You know, I know some of the information that you were involved in, or you were sort of maybe abused in a relationship, and then again she realizes it's Matt. Yeah, so we got the answer, which is the final episode, and this is when you kind of the full truth comes out quickly when Kai goes on his own mission to find information, and he reads Alison's message on Ethan's computer, and he's off there, and everyone kind of convenes on them in that sense as well. And there's that big kind of yeah, I kind of thought Ed would sort of kill himself, because throughout the episode he was like, I don't want to go to jail, and you know, before sort of, you know, then obviously he killed Nick as well in a really sort of gruesome way. You know, there's two things about that, because Ed sort of at the start was kind of innocent in this. He was just you know, learned about what Dawn was doing, and then yeah, things just kind of escalated really quickly, and I sensed he didn't want to go to jail was what he said, and he meant that. And you kind of see Dawn's regret at the end as that ties up, and I think Sophie's kind of raw emotion is even with the hostage sort of situation where Ed is standing with Kai and he's got a gun, sort of holding his ground against the police, and as he lets Kai go, you see Sophie just, you see like the emotion of, you know, a parent's emotion there of just desperately trying to get to her child, even in like risk of getting shot, because it was like he was coming over, and it was then you get the kind of Nick's funeral, I think it says here, where Roshan comes, and it's a nice moment between everyone really. Roshan and mentions to Pierre, can we talk afterwards? So imagine they connect, they had their own connection, which went back to, I think may have been episode 2, when Pia went to Sacramento to Roshan's hotel room and had a moment. But they're both kind of closely on the case as well, and Pia helped almost Roshan sort of climb the ladder a bit with him, staying on the case at the start. So that connection kind of grew as it went on. And then it kind of faded, I guess, towards the end, where there's more stuff Roshan wasn't sort of keeping Pia in the loop with, and obviously the case was kind of fading away and he was moving on to something else. So this scene at the funeral is almost their reconnection, but perhaps in a new, healthy way. So it's not so much he's like involved in her case anymore in that sense. So maybe they'll have some sort of genuine connection there away from the case in some ways. And Sophie and Pia have a moment as well, and a lot of stuff was said between them when Pia dropped Ethan off, when she went to the police station with Ethan with his information about some of the catfishes, and how Nick didn't actually meet, I think it was Mandy or another sort of identity. And then it was kind of Nick's words in episode 1 echoed with Sophie saying, you just cause destruction. It's like really, those kind of comments just fracture a relationship completely. And so it was good that there was some sort of healing of that fracture at the end, saying, I can't remember if she said you'll always be family, or there was just some nice kind of genuine comment between them, a moment there they kind of embraced. And then perhaps just to read out the last few lines of this finale, it says, as Sophie puts Nick's pictures back up. I don't know if that was just before the funeral or afterwards, but then then she generally almost starts grieving properly as she cries, saying, Nick's gone, because obviously all of this stuff suspends that really, because you're not sure, I can imagine not sure on how to grieve for someone you think, is that them, or is that, you almost need to know who they are so you can grieve for that kind of connection. But with everything that happened, it made her question the whole relationship with Nick, so everything just felt suspended. And there was just that moment of, when she was saying, I'm never going to see him again, and it's just that almost that style of the grieving process. So it's just overall was a show that had a really good mystery of the whodunit, but also rarely it had shows like this where it had loads of sort of character depth, and all of the characters were really, I don't think there was an episode that fell really below another episode, even though you kind of connect with one character, then it moves on to another character. You'll see them in scenes around it, but I felt like each character was so good that you immediately just connected with the next sort of point of view in the next episode. So that was really good. And a final comment that the creator said, he really loved this format, and they kind of asked him about doing other things, and he was saying, he's got ideas for a potential season 2 or 3. So that's quite exciting to know. And I think this was released in 2021, so maybe that's progressed even further, and there's like maybe some more developments that I may look up for this season 2. So that was review on Clickbait, and it's made me think about watching finding some more shows on Netflix about whodunit stuff as well. So I may actually type in the Netflix search whodunit, and see what shows come up that since I'm on the roll of watching One of Us is Lying and Clickbait as well. And I find, just a note is also that I find with the shows I'm watching, like it almost I kind of have to wait for the mood to arise, because I think I saw this show a long time ago on Netflix. Yeah, it's probably been out for more than a year or so, and I was kind of, because of my mental health, a lot of things can be too intense for me to watch, or it has to be a certain sort of mood when I feel a bit more able to connect, or things have to line up for me to watch them. So I'm kind of glad things almost lined up for me, allowed me to watch this and enjoy it. So that was good. I'm grateful for that. Yeah, what else have I downloaded on my Netflix? Yeah, let me just go to downloads. So I've got Marcella, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's season 3 of that sort of British detective series. I've got Purple Hearts. I actually saw 10 minutes of it and I stopped it. And I think maybe it was just too familiar storyline. I don't know. And I just felt like, oh, that's just that sort of stuff. And partly it's probably because of my mood as well. But I thought I'd give that another chance. And I know it's more of a lighter sort of that kind of show, that sort of romantic drama sort of show, and probably some of them I prefer it being more of a gritty drama, even though there is some romance in there, but some of them can be more on the romance side of stuff. So I've got that movie, and I've got Keep Breathing as well, which 6 episodes. It's kind of like another mini series. So yeah, I may keep on watching with those.